Skinwalkers have long been a part of Native American mythology, particularly among the Navajo people. These supernatural beings are said to possess the ability to transform into animals, most commonly wolves or coyotes, and are feared for their malevolent intentions. The legends of skinwalkers have spread far beyond their cultural origins, becoming a staple in modern paranormal discourse. While skeptics dismiss these stories as mere folklore or misidentifications, the accounts of those who claim to have encountered these entities remain chilling and compelling. Today, I want to take you through some of the most disturbing, allegedly true skinwalker encounters that people have shared over the years. These stories come from various regions across North America, predominantly areas close to Native American reservations or isolated wilderness locales. As with all paranormal accounts, I encourage you to approach these stories with an open but critical mind. Whether you believe in skinwalkers or not, the terror experienced by these witnesses was undeniably real to them. Our first account comes from a solo hiker in Arizona, an area rich with Native American history and consequently skinwalker lore. In 2015, this individual set out on what should have been a routine hike through a relatively unknown trail. The path was deliberately obscure, hidden behind thick bushes with a faded trail that suggested minimal human traffic, exactly what this hiker preferred. The isolation offered a respite from the stresses of everyday life, a chance to clear the mind in the embrace of nature. As the hiker progressed, the environment began to shift noticeably. The trees grew increasingly barren, many dead or fallen across the path, creating natural obstacles. The neglected state of the trail suggested it had been years since anyone had maintained it. Despite the eerie setting, the hiker pressed on, driven by curiosity and a sense of adventure. About an hour into the hike, a distinct sound broke the silence, whistling, faint but melodic, emanating from somewhere up the mountain. The sound was unnerving but rationalized as another hiker somewhere on the trail. After continuing for another 20 minutes, the whistling returned, louder and closer this time. Though increasingly uncomfortable, our hiker maintained course, unwilling to abandon the journey over what seemed like a harmless, if strange, occurrence. The path eventually led to a fallen tree obstructing the trail completely. Its thorny branches made it impossible to climb over directly, forcing a detour. Just off the path, in a small valley that appeared to be a dried riverbed, the hiker discovered something disturbing, a complex den constructed from large sticks. The craftsmanship suggested human creation rather than animal ingenuity, raising concerns that someone might be living in this remote location. As the hiker turned to leave, that same haunting whistle emanated from directly behind. Spinning around in fear, the hiker was confronted not by a person, but by a goat. This wasn't an ordinary goat, however. It was unnaturally large, its eyes seemingly penetrating, its stance completely motionless as it stared intently at the hiker. Most disturbing of all, after a moment of this unnerving standoff, the goat's mouth opened slightly in an unnatural manner, and it produced the exact same melodic whistle the hiker had been hearing. Overwhelmed with terror, the hiker fled down the mountain, stumbling over obstacles in a desperate retreat. The whistle followed, echoing softly through the trees as the hiker reached the trailhead. For years, this experience remained untold, dismissed as too implausible for anyone to believe. It wasn't until the hiker later learned about skinwalker legends that the encounter gained context. The unnatural behavior, the human-like whistling, the penetrating gaze, all characteristics commonly associated with skinwalker manifestations. Our second account takes us to the forests of Wisconsin, where annual family camping trips became the setting for an unexpected encounter. Like many families, these campers engaged in the tradition of snipe hunting, a prank where adults convince children that a fictional creature called a snipe exists in the woods. The children, equipped with sticks and bags, are sent to catch these non-existent creatures, only to be frightened by adults jumping out from hiding spots. During one such hunting expedition, an 8-year-old child became separated from the group after one of the adults, covered in fake blood, leapt from the trees pretending to be attacked by a snipe. In the ensuing chaos of screaming children, this particular child ran deep into the woods, eventually hiding in a bush near a large tree. As the child attempted to remain quiet, something unusual emerged from the darkness. The entity resembled a dog, but with disturbing anomalies. Abnormally long, skinny legs supporting a body with only patches of hair scattered across it. Its head appeared mangled and deformed. Though distant, the child could hear faint moaning emanating from the creature. Despite the instinctive revulsion, the child found it impossible to look away, describing years later a sensation of being in a trance-like state while observing the entity. This hypnotic moment was broken by the sound of the child's father calling their name and approaching through the forest. The creature, upon hearing these sounds, turned its gaze directly toward the child. When the father finally located and retrieved his child, scolding them for running so far, the creature had vanished without a sound. Though the father dismissed the child's description of what they'd seen, insisting it must have been a coyote, the witness maintained for years that the encounter defied conventional explanation. It wasn't until adulthood, when learning about Skinwalker lore, that the pieces seemingly fell into place. The unnatural appearance, the trance-inducing presence, the silent disappearance, all aligned with descriptions of Skinwalker encounters. Even decades later, this individual occasionally perceives a watching presence during woodland excursions, a lingering psychological impact of that childhood encounter. The third account comes from a family living in rural Canada, far removed from civilization in an isolated cabin. For nearly a decade, this family enjoyed a peaceful existence in the forest, sustaining themselves through farming and maintaining social connections with other cabin-dwelling families scattered miles apart. Their idyllic lifestyle was disrupted, however, by a series of increasingly disturbing incidents. It began late one night when the family's cattle became unusually agitated, moving frantically across their field as if fleeing from an unseen threat. When the father investigated, he noticed a peculiarly large deer standing partially concealed behind a tree, completely motionless, facing the house. Though initially dismissing the incident, the father couldn't shake the unease he felt upon observing the deer's unnatural stillness and apparent focus on their home. Weeks later, the situation escalated when the mother woke her husband in the middle of the night, terrified by sounds surrounding their cabin. Something was methodically circling their home, dragging what sounded like a stick along the exterior walls. After completing a full circuit, the sounds ceased. Armed with his hunting rifle, the father checked every window, finding nothing until reaching the bedroom, where once again he spotted the same deer standing in the forest, staring toward their cabin with that same unsettling stillness. The following day, determined to understand what was happening, the father decided to visit a neighbor's cabin to inquire about similar experiences. Instructing his wife to keep the children inside with doors locked, he set out down the narrow forest path. Halfway to his destination, leaves rustled behind him, and he turned to find the deer standing directly on the path, much closer than ever before. In this proximity, he noticed a chilling detail. The deer's eyes contained white around the iris and small pupils, distinctly human-like in appearance. Fleeing in terror, he reached his neighbor's cabin in a state of panic. Surprisingly, his neighbor didn't seem shocked by the account. Instead, he calmly shared his belief in Navajo skinwalkers, explaining that these entities typically only reveal themselves when they want something from you, or if you've somehow disturbed them. Though the neighbor seemed at peace discussing these matters, his acceptance only intensified the father's fear. While no further incidents occurred, the psychological damage was done. The once peaceful forest existence became tainted with paranoia and dread. Eventually, the family relocated closer to town, ostensibly for their children's benefit, but largely driven by the father's lingering terror. Notably, he never shared the full extent of his experiences or the neighbor's explanation with his wife or children, carrying the burden of knowledge alone for 15 years before finally documenting his encounter. These three accounts share several compelling commonalities, despite occurring in different regions and contexts. First, each encounter featured an animal exhibiting distinctly unnatural behavior: a whistling goat, a deformed canine, and a deer with human-like eyes. Second, all three encounters evoked an immediate, instinctive sense of dread in the witnesses, suggesting a primal recognition of something fundamentally wrong with what they were observing. Third, the encounters occurred in isolated wilderness areas, often near locations with historical connections to Native American territories. Skeptics might suggest these encounters have conventional explanations. The Arizona hiker might have encountered a person using animal calls or a diseased goat. The Wisconsin Chai